Hello and welcome to the shop. For quite a while now I've been talking about getting into resin casting, and today is the day that I kickstart that journey. And as promised, I'm going to take you along every step of the way. That's what this video is all about. The first thing we need to do is get our pressure pot set up, and out of the box it's not ready to go. We have to make some modifications. We're going to do that in this video. Now this is a 2.5 gallon. It is a pressure paint tank made by a company called Central Pneumatics. I purchased it from a local business called Harbor Freight. Now for my friends across the ocean, Harbor Freight is just a discount tool store that imports most of its merchandise from China. To give you an idea of what this pressure pot cost, it was $99.99, and Harbor Freight continually has a 20% discount. So I waited until I received one of their coupons in the mail, and I ended up paying after tax $85.59 for my pressure pot. Let's go ahead and get it out of the box. The pressure pot has these little latches on top that let you lock the top down so it can be pressurized. I keep calling it a pressure pot. It's actually a paint pressure tank. We're going to convert it into a pressure pot for casting. Now I want to show you inside the pot. The bottom of the pot is concave, so we're going to have to do something to enhance that. Several people have told me that they put a layer of rice in the bottom of the pot, and that lets them level it up to be able to set their molds down in there, and it also helps out with absorbing moisture. That's a possibility. I don't know if I'll go that route or if I'll just build something to set in there. We'll discuss that in a future video. When I first announced that I was going to start casting, and I talked about purchasing this pot, someone gave me a suggestion, and they said before you start disassembling anything off the top of the pot, take a photo of exactly what it looks like coming out of the box. That way, you put the pot together, you find out there's a problem with this pot. Say it leaks, you know exactly what to do to put it back the way it was so that you can take it back to the store. So what I'm going to do right now is stop this video because I'm recording on the camera that I need to take a photo with, and we're going to get a photo of the top of this pot. I took a couple of photos, one from the front and one from the side, making sure that in the photos you could see, I don't know how well you can see it there we are, you could see these little tags. That way if I do have to put this back together, I can align everything properly. Not that I think that'll be a huge deal, but it just makes me kind of feel better about it. At this point, we're ready to start making some modifications to the tank. I've gathered up all the parts that we're going to need to pipe the pressure pot. Before we do, we've got a couple things we need to remove from the lid. This outlet needs to come off, and this inlet assembly needs to come off. With everything removed from the top of the pot, we now need to turn our attention to the inside. There's a pipe on the outlet side that needs to be removed. This is the old T-fitting that was on the air inlet side of our pressure pot. It used to have a PRV threaded into one side and this adapter threaded into the other. I've removed those and we're going to lay them aside because we don't need them for this setup. What we want to do is take a compressor coupler with a 1/4 inch male threads, and we're going to thread it into a 1/4 inch female ball valve. That ball valve will then thread into the T. Now this used to thread directly into the top of the pot. So instead of being in the pot in this orientation, we're going to change the orientation to this. We'll go ahead and just temporarily thread this, thread this on. We're going to take a 1/4 inch male to 1/4 inch male coupler. We'll thread it into one end of the T adapter. And I've purchased a brand new pressure valve to be able to monitor the pressure in the pot, and we're going to thread that into the other end. This will get threaded into the top of the pot on the air inlet side. I've elected to use Loctite Blue 242, which is removable, to seal up all of the threads as I assemble this. I've got everything piped up on the inlet side. My compressor hose will plug in here. This is the valve I can crack open to allow the air to go into the tank. I can watch my pressure to make sure that I get the proper pressure. I'm going to be casting it right around 60 psi. So this side of the tank is done. Now let's turn our attention to the outlet side. The outlet side of my pressure pot is going to be reserved for the pressure relief valve. Now, everyone I've spoken with says they cast at 60 psi, and that's what this particular pot is rated at. This valve, it's the only one I could find at the big box stores. It will pop off and release pressure at 75 psi. Now, that's an issue, and I am going to be searching online with large supply houses to see if I can come up with a replacement for this. But in the meantime, to get everything set up, I needed a valve, and this one is going to do just fine. And the reason why it's going to do fine is because I have a compressor with a very reliable pressure relief valve, and I'm going to set the regulator for that valve, or that relief valve, at 60 psi. So my compressor should pop off and stop filling the tank before this one ever comes into play. If something does happen and my compressor fails, I've at least got this. If it pops off, I know that I can immediately open the valve and release all of the air from the tank. The way we're going to set this up is we're going to put this back on the tank. I took it off because I want to clean up the threads, and I want to put some of my blue Loctite on there to make sure I've got a good seal. This will seat into the tank. I have an adapter here, which is a 3/8 inch female to 1/2 inch female that will thread onto this fitting. And then I have a 1/2 inch male on the pressure relief valve, which I will thread on. And I will point this to the back. And by the back, what I mean is I'll be on this side operating the handle and watching the dial to know how much pressure is in the pot. I want this facing away from me, so if something happens and it blows off, it's not going to blow towards me. Here's a quick peek at the PRV. And you'll notice I do have it pointing back. This is where I'll be standing as I fill the tank. I'll crack the valve open. Watch the pressure. I can shut it off. If something does happen and the valve blows, it's going to blow away from me for safety reasons. With all of the hardware installed on top of the pot, the next step in the process is to go ahead and pressure test the pot. I don't want to do that right now because the Loctite 242 that I put on here requires 24 hours to fully cure. So we're going to put this pot aside, give it time to cure. We'll be back shortly and we'll test the pressure on this pot. It's been well over 24 hours since I assembled everything on top of my pressure pot, and I feel like the Loctite has had plenty of time to cure. One of the things I did today, I have an oil water trap, but it's an old one, so I swung in and picked up this one at the big box store. This is for oil, water, and debris. I added an inlet and an outlet, and I'm going to use this between my compressor and the pressure pot. We'll go ahead and get that connected up. Next up, we need to lock down the pot, and we can do that by simply tightening these wing nuts. Now, one of the things I want to do, and I attempted to do this today, however, my big box store, these wing nuts are 10mm coarse thread, and my big box store had some replacement bolts. I want to take these off, put bolts on here so I can use a ratchet to tighten everything down and get a good seal. They just did not have a 10mm course that matched these threads. There is a place called Evansville Nut and Bolt, and I'm going to swing by there tomorrow and pick up 4 bolts for the top of this pot. All right, I've got everything cinched down. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and attach my air line. I don't know if you heard that hiss. I got a little bit above 60 pounds and my pressure relief valve started to kind of release a little pressure. It should be popping off around 70, so it's running a little bit low. I may need to make an adjustment on it. Currently, I'm holding exactly 60 pounds of pressure. What I'm going to do is disconnect my airline, make sure my valve is tight, and I'm just going to let this set for a couple of hours and see if I have any drop in pressure. That'll let me know if there's any leak in my tank or any of my fittings. My pressure pot has been sitting for about 30 minutes and you can see that I've dropped about 6 pounds of pressure. I don't hear any hissing noises coming from any of the fittings on top of the pot or from around the lip of where the cap meets the pot. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take the pressure back up to 60 pounds and I'm going to leave the compressor hose plugged into the valve in hopes that maybe the air is leaking by this ball valve. We're back up to 60 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and let this set for another half an hour and we'll take a look at how the pressure looks then. Another half an hour has passed and you can see that the pressure has dropped from 60 down to about 54 pounds. So leaving the hose connected to the inlet made no difference. I don't feel like I'm losing the air here. I really don't feel like I'm losing it on any of my upper components. These Harbor Freight pots are notorious for losing air around the rim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release all of the pressure from the pot. I'm going to rotate the lid and I'm going to recharge the pot. And my hope is I can hit an orientation that will hold the 60 pounds. If I can, I'll mark the lid and the pot so that I can always put the top back in that orientation. If that doesn't work, then I'll break out a spray bottle of soapy water and I'll begin to shoot it all around the tank and look for air bubbles. I replaced all of the winged bolts on top of my pressure pot with standard bolts. These are 10mm by 1.5 thread pitch, and I was able to use a ratchet to get a nice tight fit, way tighter than I could do by hand. I also received a message from someone saying to put just a little layer of Vaseline on the seal inside the lid, and that will help the pot seal. I've done that. I've charged the pot to 60 psi. It is now 5 p.m. and I'll be leaving for a while. I'm going to let the pot set and see how much air it loses from now until the time I return. It is currently 8:45. It has been 3 hours and 45 minutes and my pressure pot has held steady at 60 pounds of pressure. Now that I've had a successful test of my pressure pot, I feel that I'm ready to do my first cast. So I'm going to close this video, but before I do, I need to say thank you to everyone out there who helped me by answering questions. I was posting photos of this on Instagram, and that's where I got the idea for the petroleum jelly. Someone else gave me the idea for replacing the bolts to be able to crank them down with a ratchet to get them nice and tight, as well as even pressure all around the lid. I'm going to go ahead and close this video. We'll let a little bit of the air out of the pot. I want to say one last thing about pressure pots, and that is they can be very, very dangerous. So if you decide to get into the hobby of casting with a pressure pot, please use every safety precaution that you can to protect yourself from injury. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a great evening, everybody.